On today's episode of the Speech and Language Kids podcast, we're going to be talking about social communication therapy. I'm going to be sharing our social communication curriculums, which are pathways that you can follow to help a child improve their social communication skills. So, I am your host, Carrie Clark, speech language pathologist, and these curriculums that we're going to be talking about today are from our SLK curriculum, where we have created curriculums for every area of communication. And these are fully structured, pre-built pathways that you can follow for therapy, but they're also fully customizable. So you'll see as we go along today that you are going to pick the right curriculum for the child based on the types of social communication challenges they're having, but then you're also going to pick the starting level and the specific skills that you work on to support that area. So even though it is all laid out and very structured, it is still very much able to be individualized to the needs of the client. So for this season of the podcast, I'm doing one episode on each of our areas. I've already done speech, language, and functional communication. So now we're on to social communication, and then we'll have one for fluency and one for voice and resonance as well. So check out those other episodes as well. And if you would like to get access to our curriculum, you can go to speechandlanguagekids.com. You'll see the Get the Curriculum button up in the upper right-hand corner, or also the Sign In button if you already have a subscription. And then right in the middle, you'll see a menu that says Our Curriculums. If you hover over that, you can go down to our Social Communication Curriculums, and that is where we are today. So these are our comprehensive plans for boosting social skills in children and teens. And these curriculums were specifically designed to be used by a child or a teen's whole team. So that means that our speech language pathologists and professionals, our SLPAs, our parents and caregivers, and even our teachers and educators can all be using this same framework for teaching social communication skills, which means that everybody's on the same page. Everyone has a shared vocabulary of how we're talking about these skills, how we're teaching these skills, and how we're supporting these skills. And that means our students, our clients are going to make faster progress. And that was the whole design when I created my curriculums. I wanted a program that could be used by everyone, and I wanted it to be comprehensive. I wanted it to be easy to follow, but still customizable, and I think we have hit all of those marks, so I'm super excited. I hope you are too. So let's go ahead and start and talk about who would be appropriate for social communication therapy, and in particular to use our social communication curriculums. So there's a lot of different ways that kids can struggle in social communication. So I'm going to list quite a few different signs. A child or a teenager does not need to have all of these signs to benefit from this therapy. It could just be one or two. It could be as many as all of them. But here are some of the signs that we would be looking for that tell us that a child could use some support in social communication. So starting off, if a child or a teen is not responding to others when spoken to, and not just a intentional, I don't want to hear what you have to say, but actually just not responsive to other people. Also, those who struggle with initiating or maintaining conversations. This can be really challenging for our kids with social impairments, where it's hard to start the conversation, it's hard to keep the conversation going. And then those who struggle with knowing what to do when the conversation falls apart. What do we do if somebody doesn't understand what was said? How can we repair that conversation and help somebody else understand? This is also helpful for children and teens who are struggling to build and maintain friendships and relationships. A lot of times, if that's the case, it's because there are some of these social communication pieces that are either missing or they're just not understanding what's happening in these interactions. And so giving them some extra support can help with that as well. This can be helpful for children who have trouble self-calming when they're upset, calming themselves down, and with navigating disagreements with other people. So those can be skills that we see they're struggling with. Also, children who have trouble speaking up for themselves. We call this self-advocacy, and sometimes our children or teens either don't feel comfortable speaking up and saying, hey, I need this, or I don't like that, or maybe they're just not sure how to say it, or they're having trouble saying it in such a way that people will listen. So that can be helpful as well. All right, let's see. What else do we have here? Topic maintenance, being able to stay on a topic and provide relevant information. That can be challenging sometimes. And then we also have a section on this curriculum you'll see for children who are speaking in some situations but refuse to speak in others. So like maybe they can speak at home but they won't speak at school. We call that selective mutism, and we have a social curriculum for that as well. Okay, so before I get to the specific curriculums and the tools that we have, I do want to just make a note on neurodiversity. So if you are not familiar with that term, neurodiversity just indicates that everyone has a different brain. There are a lot of different types of brains out there. And if we are neurodiversity affirming, what that means is that we support all brain types, we support all learning types, we support all thinking types. Whether you have ADHD or autism, or you have a stutter or anxiety or depression, all neurotypes are welcome here. And so our curriculum is neurodiversity affirming. We honor every learner's unique brain and communication style. So our lessons, our curriculums, they encourage each person to communicate in ways that do feel comfortable and authentic to them and true to who they are. So we emphasize that throughout our programs. Yes, we're teaching them skills that are challenging for them. And yes, sometimes they can be uncomfortable. But instead of saying, no, you need to act like everyone else, you need to look like everyone else, you need to think like everyone else, we're saying, okay, you're struggling with this. It's causing this challenge in your life. How can we find a way to overcome that feels good to you, feels authentic, and still gets all of your needs met and the needs of other people around you? And so we're looking at this from a very neurodiversity affirming approach. Okay, that's my disclaimer. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about our 5 different curriculums that we have here. So these are based on the types of social communication skills that a child or teen might be struggling with. And what I recommend is that you choose one at a time to work on. We don't need to be working on multiple paths because that's a lot to take in. So we look through these curriculums, we choose one that seems to be a best fit or we think would be most helpful, and we roll with that. Now, sometimes it does kind of come down to a little bit of a guessing game of trying to decide what would be the most helpful. And sometimes it is a guess. Sometimes we say, I think this one, we start down that path and we go, nope, that was not helpful. And then we back up and we try a different one. And that's okay too. So don't beat yourself up if you're not totally sure which of these paths to take. But we do have some tools inside the curriculum that will help you make those decisions as well to determine where a child needs to be. Okay, so the first one is social awareness and interaction. So this is being aware of other people, being able to interact back and forth with other people, and having some perspective taking ability in terms of being aware that other people don't always think the same way that we do or communicate the same way we do, and that they have a perspective that's different than ours, and how we can use that to navigate interactions. So that's one piece, that's one curriculum. And I'm going to go into in-depth on all of these and kind of tell you which skills are listed as well. But this is just going to give you an overview to start with. The next one then is our emotional regulation and self-advocacy curriculum. So this one starts off with our younger students, our younger children, working on just self-calming, being able to use strategies when you're upset and use communication to get through that. And then as they get older through this curriculum, we look at the idea of being able to advocate for your own needs, telling people what you do or do not want or need, and then being able to be proactive about using those emotional regulation strategies as well. So that's all one piece, but you'll see as we come through here, there's different levels depending on the child's age as they're going through these curriculums. Okay, the next one is conversational skills. And this one encompasses a ton because there are a lot of different skills that go into having a conversation. So we start very basically with just some basic back and forth interactions. And then as they get older, we move through these levels of being able to have more complex conversations, navigating hard things, hard topics, disagreements, being able to repair conversations when they break down, things like that. Okay, the next one is abstract language. And if you have listened to my podcast on language curriculums, the abstract language curriculum is listed there as well because it not only helps us in our ELA class and our reading and writing, but it also helps us in everyday interactions. So this is going to cover things like idioms or expressions where we say one thing but really mean something else, like it's raining cats and dogs. It's not really raining cats and dogs. That's an expression. So we're talking about that. We're talking about being able to make social inferences and be able to understand something that's not explicitly stated. A lot of different things, sarcasm, those go into the abstract language. And then our fifth curriculum in the area of social communication is selective mutism. So again, that's for those students who are able to speak in some situations, not able to speak in others. This is actually an anxiety-based communication disorder, and so we approach it from a completely different perspective than we would a behavioral challenge, for example. So that one gets its own curriculum. Okay, we're going to jump into each of those. I'm going to tell you some signs of how you can tell a child might be a good fit for that curriculum. And then I'm going to walk you through the levels. So even if you are not an active subscriber to our curriculum, if you're not, we'd love to have you. But if you're not, you can still use this information to start to wrap your head around how there are these pathways. And there are these pathways that we could take to help a child develop these skills in a way that is logical and step-by-step and gradually increases their independence in these areas. Okay? So for the social awareness and interaction curriculum, these children may not respond when their name is called. They may struggle with joint attention or turn taking. They may have trouble with proximity or giving others personal space. They may struggle to stay on topic and provide relevant information, and they may have trouble with perspective taking and understanding others. So this one curriculum spans the whole, basically birth to 18 range, because as we get older, our social awareness increases, our ability to interact increases. And so the 3 levels that I have selected for this curriculum, we start with our younger kids. This is our beginner level, and we start with building social awareness. And we're looking at ages 1 to 2 years in this one. Now that is the age that these skills typically emerge, but we might be working on this beginner level with older children as well. But these are the skills listed in the beginner level of this curriculum are responding to their name, sharing joint attention, some basic turn taking, and early social routines and games like peekaboo. So that's what we work on in the beginning level. Our intermediate level then is for our 3 to 6 year olds and older, and this is strengthening social engagement. So you can say, you're not going to start with beginner level with a 1-year-old, and then as soon as they master that, move up to intermediate level and then move up to advanced. This is more like a choose your own adventure where you're saying, okay, this child is in the intermediate level, this child is in the advanced level, and we're customizing the therapy that way, okay? So intermediate level, strengthening social engagement. Now we're looking at things like topic maintenance, being able to provide relevant information in an interaction, understanding proximity and personal space, all those things that go into just having an interaction, okay? And then at the advanced level, we look at perspective taking and social understanding. And now we're looking at maybe 4 years old, probably going to be starting a little older than that, but social understanding begins around 4 years. But we're going all the way up through 10 years just for typical development of this. And if we have a child who is delayed or is struggling with this, it's probably going to be into those teenage years. But this is starting to understand that other people have different perspectives and feelings than we do. Using that perspective-taking ability to understand others and understand why they're doing what they're doing, and then using perspective-taking to resolve conflicts and misunderstanding. So I will say, if you are up to date in the neurodiversity discussions that are happening right now, there's been a lot of discussion about perspective-taking and empathy and whether or not that is an appropriate skill to teach to anyone, because we don't want it to come across as we are saying, you don't think the way that other people do, so you need to have more empathy and think like they do. And I think that's the way it got pushed for a while, or maybe it was presented. And so what we try to do with this curriculum is not use this as a tool to try to get you to think neurotypically, but just to understand that other people have different perspectives, to understand why might somebody do that? What are a bunch of different ways that they might, or reasons that they might have done that? Because we don't know what other people are thinking, but we can understand that people do think differently. And this is not something that we are just teaching to neurodiverse children to get them to understand the neurotypicals. It should go both ways, right? Neurotypical children also need to understand that just because your brain works this way doesn't mean that this child's does. And so what I use this perspective taking and empathy and social understanding for is just understanding the world around you and being able to acknowledge that people are different and that that's beautiful and wonderful and it's okay. And then how can we move through our day given that understanding? And so, resolving conflicts and misunderstandings, that happens all the time. I know several adults that I think maybe we could use this program for. Some of them are in our government. So I think what's helpful is to just be able to acknowledge that other people have differences, acknowledge that we have differences, know ourselves, and then be able to say, okay, how can I use that information to empower me instead of making me feel bad? So hopefully that makes sense. But if you have questions on that, please ask, because I will talk about that all day if you would like to. But that is our first one, our social awareness and interactions curriculum. Okay. The next one is emotional regulation and self-advocacy. And just as with the first one, we have levels ranging all the way from little ones having meltdowns and tantrums on the floor to a teenager who's struggling to tell their teacher that they need an accommodation. Okay, so this spans a long way. So on one end, we have little ones or maybe older ones who are having trouble self-calming when they're upset, having trouble managing the highs and lows in their mood and behavior. We have those who are resorting to challenging or unexpected behaviors when they're struggling with social interactions, such as being aggressive or saying hurtful things, all the way up through children and teens who are having trouble speaking up for what they need or taking action to get their needs met. So we have levels for all of that. The beginner level then is replacing challenging behaviors with communication. So how can we use our communication as a tool instead of having to resort to, I'm just calling them challenging behaviors. There's, lots of different ways that this is described, but things that cause problems in their everyday life. Okay. And we're looking at 3 to 7 years and beyond is when we're working on those skills. At the intermediate level, now we're looking at understanding emotions and how to calm ourselves down. So this is 5 to 10 years. I know there are some strategies that we can teach children below 5 years to work on calming, but at that age, they really are co-regulating. We are helping them calm. Even if they are using the strategies, it's really us initiating that for most kids. Some kids are able to do that, but a lot of calming at before 5 years is co-regulation, meaning that the adult is leading the calming. So from 5 to 10 years, now we're saying, okay, let's figure out how we can regulate those emotions. Let's figure out how we can calm ourselves down. What are some strategies that help when you're feeling like this? And it's going to be different for everyone. So that's, again, where that neurodiversity affirming comes in. What's calming to me might be alerting to you and vice versa. So we can acknowledge the differences and find strategies that work for you. And then at the advanced level, we're looking at self-advocacy and proactive regulation. So this is from 5 to 12 years and beyond. But again, if you have a teenager who's struggling with this, they might be working on it much longer. This is speaking up for what you want or need, knowing, hey, I'm getting anxious. I need to go take a walk before I blow it, and get really mad. Or get really freaked out. I need to do this thing before it goes too far. And then being able to say, hey, teacher, I need a break to go take a walk. And when they say, well, we're in the middle of something, how do you navigate that? So all of those skills, which most of our teenagers struggle with to some extent. So that's kind of the gamut of the emotional regulation and self-advocacy curriculum. All right, next up is our conversational skills curriculum. So this is for students who are struggling to initiate interactions with others. They're struggling with maintaining a topic and providing relevant information, Maybe they don't speak up for what they need. Some of these skills are going to be repeated in various curriculums because they come up in more than one area. We have some that have trouble continuing an interaction. Maybe they don't know how to respond, comment, ask questions to keep the conversation going. We have the trouble repairing a conversation when it breaks down, and navigating disagreements are all included in this. So beginner level is initiating and responding in conversations. We're going to start with our 4 to 6 year olds on this, of just starting an interaction and responding when someone talks to us. When we get to the intermediate level, we're looking at maintaining those conversations and topic management. So continuing it, keeping it going, providing relevant information, staying on topic, or announcing topic shifts. Not that you have to stay on the same topic forever, but being able to manage the topic, manage the conversation. And then our advanced level, we have this down as 6 to 12 years and beyond. This is navigating complex conversations. So repairing communication breakdowns, navigating disagreements, self-advocacy and speaking up for what you want or need. That one's on there again. And code switching, being able to say things differently when you're talking to your teacher versus your friend. So that is the conversation one. And then we have our abstract language. So this is idioms, sarcasm, similes, metaphors, making inferences. If you take everything literally, if you take everything at face value, you're going to struggle in social interactions, especially as you get into those middle school, high school years, because there's so much abstract language that goes into conversations and so much nuances and inferencing that happens that if you're missing those things, it really stands out and it can cause challenges with interactions. Now, if a child has found their group of friends that thinks it's fine that they're literal and they are able to get through that and they, have some self-awareness and it's okay, great, no big deal. But if they're struggling in social interactions because of this piece, we have tools we can use to support them. So, beginner level, we're just identifying literal versus non-literal. Then we work on figurative language at the intermediate level, which is idioms, figures of speech, similes, and metaphors. And then at the advanced level, we're looking at that inferencing and social nuance, which is either social inferencing, understanding sarcasm and irony, those kinds of more nuanced skills. All right, and then finally, we have our selective mutism curriculum. So this is those children and teens who will speak in some situations or with some people, but not in others. So the most commonly talked about one, I think, is when kids will speak at home, but they won't speak at school. They also may show anxiety about speaking or social interactions. Because here's the thing, this is an anxiety-based communication disorder. And so it's not a willful behavior. It seems like that a lot of times. There is so much anxiety, so much pressure that they're putting on themselves that they don't feel comfortable speaking in certain situations. And so what we can do for them, we start off by modifying the environment for communication success. Okay, so we start by working to reduce the anxiety. And I should say here, this is a team approach. We should absolutely be doing this in tandem with a mental health professional, whether it's the school counselor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, somebody who can help us with that piece of it. Because yes, it's a communication disorder, but it's also an anxiety disorder. And so this is where we team up very, very nicely with our mental health professionals, our teachers, our parents. Everyone should be working from the same playbook because we don't want to be giving mixed signals that will make this worse. And we don't want to be missing a piece of this puzzle that needs to be addressed from a mental health perspective, okay? But we start off with our beginning level of modifying the environment. We want to increase the predictability of their day. If they know what's coming, they're going to feel less anxious. We want to increase their sense of control. If they feel like they're in control, then they don't have to grasp control by controlling their speech in terms of not speaking. We also want to increase their independence and their confidence and just make them generally feel like the great, amazing, wonderful human beings that they are so that they feel comfortable going outside their comfort zone and doing the speech tasks that are hard. Okay? So we start with that. And this is just, we're not even asking them to speak yet. We're just modifying their environment. Intermediate level then, once we feel ready to move on to that, is going to be establishing motivation for speech. and self-calming strategies. So we want to tap into some reason that they might agree that it would be helpful to speak. And I'm not going to be able to tell you what that is. You're not going to be able to tell me what that is. We have to ask them. And that might be tricky. We do have our therapy kit up here. I'm not sure if it's this page or a different one. I actually think it might be where there's some pictures like, hey, do you think it would be helpful to speak to be able to ask to leave the room? Like we can ask them to point to pictures of things that they think it would be helpful for. And so we can try to tap into reasons that they might want to speak. And this might be multiple conversations over multiple sessions. And maybe it takes us a while to get some motivation figured out. And maybe we don't right away, but we come back to it. But then we also want to teach them some self-calming strategies so that they're able to have some tools in their toolbox for when they're feeling anxious, but they still want to talk anyway. And we're going to give them those tools to calm down so that they can try that hard thing of speaking. Okay. And then the advanced level, once we get these foundations in place, then we can actually work on helping them communicate in increasingly challenging situations. So basically what we do here is we find the context in which they will communicate, okay? Whether it's being at home, being with a parent, maybe they will talk in the speech therapy room, but not in the classroom. Maybe they will talk to the librarian, but no one else. We find where they can communicate. And then we just very gradually make it more. We increase the challenge level. So let's say the example of they'll speak to the librarian and no one else, okay? But they'll only speak to the librarian if the librarian is the only one in the room. So we've established that. So now it's, okay, well, you're going to go speak to the librarian. The speech therapist is just going to stand at the door. And then it's, okay, you're going to go speak to the librarian, but the speech therapist is going to sit in the corner of the library. And so we're just gradually making it a little tiny bit harder, not so hard that they melt down, but just like a little increase. And then maybe we get to the point where we're having a conversation with both the speech therapist and the librarian. And then maybe it's just the speech therapist, but in the library. And then it's the speech therapist in the speech therapy room. And then it's the speech therapist in the speech therapy room, but we have another friend come in. Okay, so you see, we just gradually baby step closer and closer to what we are hoping for, which is usually communication in the classroom. But all the while, we are still modifying the environment for success. We're giving them tools. We're giving them picture boards that they can use in class until they are comfortable. We're not punishing them for not speaking, because that's not what this is. This is anxiety. We got to reduce the anxiety in order to get them to feel comfortable stepping out of this. Okay. I could keep going on that one forever too, but we're going to max out our time here. So there's more of that inside the curriculum, and there's more of all of these inside the curriculum. So basically the way this works, if you sign up for the curriculum, you sign up for a subscription, it's $50 a month or $500 a year, but that gets you access to all of our curriculum. So all the social ones we just talked about, but also all the speech, language, functional communication, fluency, and voice and resonance. You get all of those. You get all of our courses. You get our core language program, which is a 16-week oral language intervention. It's perfect for RTI or MTSS if you're doing that. What else comes with this? Oh, we have our AI-powered material generators. We have our discussion board with support. There's so much in here, guys. But the key is you get these curriculums, and you can just grab these. We have the tools to show you exactly where to start. You grab the materials, you throw them in a folder, you're ready for therapy. Or you can print them off and use them at home. You can pull them up on the iPad, on your smart board. Lots of options. So hopefully that is helpful to you. You can start to see these different pathways we can go down to help children with social communication. Next episode, what do we got next? Fluency. We're going to be talking about stuttering. So join us on our next podcast episode, and join us inside our curriculum. We have a 7-day free trial, so you can hop in and then you can ask questions and get some support in there as well. So hope to see you on the inside. Have such a great day, and we'll see you on the next podcast.